Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Talk Vegas Property Management. I'm your host, Kirsten Ames, licensed broker salesperson and permitted property manager here in Las Vegas. Today's episode, we're going to go over the 5 most important legal notices that everyone should know in property management. I apologize, I had taken a couple weeks off. I got really sick, so I'm hoping to get caught back up with some of these videos and getting everyone back on track. I'm going to look down a lot just because I did take some time off and I wrote these prior to taking that time off. So let's dive in. So every property manager has to play both offense and defense, and that means knowing how and when to issue legal notices that protect the property manager and the lease. So whether you're dealing with non-payment, nuance complaints, or lease violations, these 5 notices are the core tools that we rely on in Nevada. Some things to think about is that if you have one word wrong, one missed date, one notice served improperly, the whole case is tossed out. So these notices aren't suggestions, they're literally Nevada statute. I can talk. And so let's get into some of those and really talk about them as much as possible, but as quickly as possible because I like to keep these short. So the most important notice that everybody likes to know about is the 7-day pay or quit notices. This is regarding to non-payment of rent, formerly known as 5-day notices. I still hear people use that term. It's been a 7-day notice for some time, but still people reference it as a 5-day notice. It's the same thing, it's just that the time frames have changed. One of the key things I want to point out when it comes to a 7-day pay or quit notice, it really is only about rent. So if you have late fees in there, eviction fees, maintenance fees, all kinds of other stuff, none of that is relevant. You can list it on your notice. You can put what they currently owe, but maybe I'll try and find a form that I can kind of show you how it looks. But on the form, it'll ask you, what is their rent? When was the last time they paid that rent? What are the late fees? And just referencing back to some of my older videos, late fees can only be 5% of the monthly rent. You cannot do $25 a day, $50 a day, $100 a day. Legally, that's not allowed. It's 5% of the base rent. That's your late fee. It'll ask you those things. It won't ask you if there's additional charges, but it will ask you what they owe in total, and you can have that number in there. You don't want to put like a partial payment. Just put everything in there. If you do go to court, you can go over some of that, but the judge is going to tell you that a 7-day pay or quit really is only related to non-payment of rent. So those other things aren't really going to matter, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Let me just continue on with the 7-day pay or quit. A 7-day pay or quit is not calendar days. This is something that is also misunderstood. So for example, if your property, it's judicial days, sorry. For example, if your property is in the city of Henderson, Henderson courts are not open on Fridays. They always have a 3-day weekend. So let's use an example that you serve the 7-day pay or quit notice on a Monday. Just so you know, you cannot serve them over the weekend. It has to be just go with judicial days, okay? So not a holiday, not Labor Day. So let's just pretend it's just a regular Monday. You serve it on a Monday. That day does not count as day 1. Tuesday counts as day 1. So you serve it on a Monday. Day 1 is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And if we're in the city of Henderson, you're not including Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And now you're reverting back to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it's 11 days. So the 7-day pay or quit is, again, judicial days. And the clock starts ticking when the notice is served, but not on that day. It sounds kind of weird, but it does start, like the date of service matters. However, day 1 is the very next day after it being served. Another thing when it comes to serving these papers, you have to use a third party. Years ago, and it has been years, we used to serve them ourselves as a property management company. Again, we manage approximately 1,600. Back then it was a little less, but not by much, a couple hundred. So we used to have to print them out. We used to make tons of copies. I think it was like 3 or 4 copies per property. And then we would physically all have to be in the office that day. And then we would all divide them out by neighborhood, and we used to post them on their doors. They legally changed that to where now we have to use a third-party company. So there's always going to be some type of fee associated with it. Now, if you're using a property manager, even though those fees are theoretically going to be a tenant charge because it's in the lease that it says, anything with 7-day pay or quit notices is their responsibility. It's $50, and we were paying this third-party company to file it and post it on the door. Upfront fees are going to come from the landlord. It's the cost of doing business. I'm sorry, it sucks, but hopefully you're able to recoup some of that. Maybe the tenant will pay it back at some point and they don't vacate, and then maybe they were just in a tough spot that month. Or hopefully there's enough in the security deposit to reimburse you for those fees. But again, as I've said numerous times before in previous videos, this is a business. There's going to be costs, there's going to be expenses, there's going to be losses. And this one is just a small one. I can't remember exactly what the company charges. I think it's like $50 or $60 per property for them to not only file the 7-day pay or quit notices with the court, but to also post them on the door. And then you also have to serve them certified mail or certificate of mailing, whatever's cheaper. They're both the same in the court's eyes, so it really doesn't matter. But you do have to do that, and you have to have proof that you served them mail that way as well on top of posting it. And so that's why it's nice to use a third-party company too, because they sign off on it. It's a non-interested third party that signs off saying like we legitimately posted it on their door as well. So as far as proof in court, a couple of little things I want to also mention on the 7-day pay or quits is that it really is only about the rent. So if in that 7 days, in that 7 judicial days, the tenant legally only has to pay the rent. If there's late fees of that 5%, it's not required for them to pay that. If you added maintenance charges on there, that was their responsibility. It doesn't matter. The tenant only has to pay the rent. Now, I've heard some judges say that a landlord can reject it, but realistically you can't. Like if a tenant is coming in with 100% of the funds minus those other things, then you do have to accept it, and it avoids an eviction on their record. The other option is the tenant can vacate the property during that 7 days, and then there's no eviction on their record, but they do have to prove that they have relinquished the property back to the owner. The other caveat to that, and I guess I don't want to get too far into it because it becomes like a legal thing, and I am not an attorney, right? So please understand that if you have legal questions, go talk to an actual attorney. But depending on how your lease is written, you can put in there that like past due utilities, late fees, things like that are considered rent. And so if you have it specifically stated that way, again, talk to an attorney to make sure I'm telling you the truth. But if you have those additional things outside of the base rent being called rent, then you can lump that together as something that they're required to pay in full alongside the base rent during that 7-day pay or quit notices. Common mistakes that I see when it comes to 7-day pay or quits is listing partial rent amounts, serving the notice too early. So every lease should have a grace period. If they're due on the 1st, then they're late by the 4th, and then we don't even serve them until the 10th of the month. So we make sure we have a very good grace period before we're even utilizing this. And it helps it get granted easier in court later on because we gave them such a big grace period outside of their traditional grace period. The four, like, so due on the 1st, late on the 4th, what the 4th does is instill that 5% late fee. Then after that, they still have some time before we're filing those notices. And I would say the vast majority of people end up paying. Things happen, maybe shifting jobs, or maybe there was a holiday, so their paycheck came in a little bit later, stuff like that. Like, honestly, we don't have to utilize these very often, but out of 1,600 properties, yes, sporadically, we have had to do it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on 7-day pay or quits. I guess ultimately, don't use a 5-day pay or quit. Those forms are old and outdated. It won't go anywhere. Make sure you list the correct amounts and don't serve them over the weekend or holidays. The other thing I will say, well, I won't get into the eviction part, but this is the form that you would use as a precursor to an eviction. And you have to do a step-by-step process. And this would be step 1. And again, only relating to rent. But I know that's the most important one. So depending on how much time I have at the end of going over some of these other notices that I'm about to go over, I'll go through what is step 2 on the 7-day pay or quit. But let's get through some of the notices first, because I know evictions are some of the biggest questions that people have. And our neighboring state, California, operates very differently. And I know we have a lot of people that are landlords from California. So I know that's a big scare for people. So I definitely will talk about it, but these other notices won't take long. So let's get into it, right? Let's dive in. So you have a 3-day nuisance notice. I think I said a different word when I was introducing in the earlier part of this podcast. I'm still drinking my coffee. Give me a break. But a 3-day nuisance notice. So this is used when a tenant is creating something like unsafe, disruptive, or illegal conditions. These are really, really hard to prove. Well, okay. I'll try and think of some examples that may work, but we typically don't file these just because they're very difficult to prove and to go anywhere with it. Having HOAs out here makes it really nice for that reason, because if we get a lot of HOA violations for stuff, it proves a lot. Another thing that we do that's very helpful is we do photo inspections. Goodness, photo inspections. And so when we're able to kind of like get out there and take real photos that match up to their move-in inspection. So the move-in inspection is prior, we take a series of photos prior to us giving them keys. So it's on the same day that we give them keys. So that's exactly what the house looked like prior to them moving their belongings in. So if we take one a month, 2, 3, 4, 5 months into their lease and we do another series of photos, it's like a clear comparison of like how they're treating the property. But this is really more about like criminal activity, harassing other people. You could say other tenants, like if it's condo style property, right? Obviously there's not going to be other tenants in the same house. That would be subleasing, unless it's like a family or something like that. Dangerous behavior or damage to the unit. Loud repeated disturbances. This is where HOA comes in pretty handy for sort of their behavior in the community. So we have had situations where there have been people that maybe are loud or having parties that night or something like that. It really doesn't happen very often. A handful of times, maybe we've been notified of damages of property. Realistically, I'm trying to think of some stories, but it doesn't happen as often as you may think. Criminal activity, like the most criminal activity we've had at some properties, has maybe been domestic violence. Those are sad, unfortunate stories, but that probably would be something that we would file. But realistically, we haven't filed a 3-day notice on those. Typically what happens, whoever the perpetrator was in that scenario leaves. They have court stuff that makes them leave, and then we let the tenant break the lease, and then they vacate. And so, yeah, we don't use these very often, to be honest. But if you do need it, if you do find something, you do have options. And again, just to be clear, when I say these days, like 7 days, 3 days, it's all judicial days. And it all falls under the same thing, not weekends, not holidays. Just keep all of that in mind. So in those cases, when you have 3-day nuisance complaints, just document everything: photos, communication, whatever you have, written complaints from neighbors if you need it, if you're comfortable talking to the neighbors and that's something. They're just hard. Honestly, you have to have a lot of documentation to get that granted, and I just don't really see it as often, but it is there. You have that option. Next notice, 5-day notice to comply or quit. So because the 7-day pay or quit was formerly known as 5-day, when people don't do this often or haven't had to do this in a couple years, maybe they've had a long-term tenant for the last 10 years and they're not familiar with law changes, it can be confusing. But a 7-day judicial day pay or quit is regarding rent. The 5-day notice to comply or quit is a lease violation. Again, judicial days, not weekends, not holidays, and pay attention to what city you're in because they have different judicial days. This is when it's not about money, generally not about money. It could be not maintaining landscaping, using the garage as a bedroom, which is against, code, and that's a safety issue. Unauthorized occupants, such as subleasing, maybe unauthorized pets. That does not count towards ESA or emotional support animals, as well as service animals. Those are protected. HOA violations, having too many of that and violating HOA rules. So you can use that for those scenarios too. I was trying to think if I had any other examples outside of the ones I kind of listed. But with this, again, these are kind of hard to, when it's not as clear cut as something as paying rent and not paying rent, you just got to make sure you document everything, whether that's communication, whether that's photos, HOA violations. Keep a copy of everything, print it out. Yeah, that's the best I can say, is that, the notice must describe the violation clearly, and cite the section of the lease that it's violating. So if you are somebody that is writing your own lease, just something to think about of what you're gonna write in there that constitutes something that you're not gonna accept for behavior to the property. I'm trying to think on this one, you could probably add in here how they're treating the property as well. Like if there's an issue with a 3-day notice, because the 3-day notice is about damage to the property, but if it's not severe damage, maybe, I don't know, maybe talk to an attorney at that point just to see, or even process serving company that does these violations, they'll be able to guide you to see which one may be best. Yeah, sorry, keep pausing throughout this whole thing because I keep trying to think if there's anything I'm missing on each of these, just to be a little more thorough. Okay, next notice is a 30-day no cause notice. What bothers me with this one is so many people get confused when it comes to their lease. So we'll have tenants and they'll have like a 1-year lease, right? Like they start January 1st and it goes to January 1st of next year. And then all of a sudden they just leave the property and they don't say anything. They're like, well, my lease was up. Okay, it automatically rolls over month to month when you have a lease. Somebody has to provide you this notice, which is called a 30-day notice, no cause notice to vacate. So if you're planning on leaving at the end of your lease, if that's January 1st of the following year, then I need it by December 1st of the previous year, right? Before that lease ends, I need a 30-day notice. And it goes both ways. So if you have the owner who wants the person out by the end of the lease, then I need to provide the notice to the tenant. It's a no cause notice. All it means is your term is up and we want you out. Now, this also, if they're on a month to month, it'd be the same thing. So let's say they didn't renew their lease or the owner didn't extend a lease renewal and they're just on a month-to-month basis, that's when you can use this. You cannot use it when the lease is active. Sorry, my dog is whining. But they do already have to be on a month-to-month. Okay, I'm going to pause it. So on these ones, you do, so the 30-day notices that are no cause, that means you don't have to have a reason. The tenant doesn't need to tell you why they want to leave. The owner doesn't need to tell you why they want their property back. It's literally a no cause. So you can't use this as a backdoor to get somebody evicted. You can't use it if their lease goes for another 6 months. There's other caveats to this as well. If your tenant, like let's say their lease is up and you're not doing a 30-day notice, but you want them to roll over month to month, sometimes your HOA will not allow it. We have a variety of HOAs that do not allow short-term rentals at all, which includes month to month, even though that person may have been there a year, 2, 3 years already. And now you just want like 3 more months until the sales market gets better, something like that. It doesn't matter. There's some HOAs that require 6-month minimum, 1-year minimum. So you always have to check your CC&Rs. And then of course, you always have to check what's going on in the world, because it's like COVID. And during that pandemic, you couldn't evict anyone at any time, even a 30-day notice. So even if they had been paying on rent, but you wanted to get rid of the property because of COVID, maybe some things happened in your personal life and you need to sell the home, those kind of things, and interest rates were low, doesn't matter. You could not get people out of properties during that pandemic. So you have to check with state, local laws, your CC&Rs, those kind of things. I mean, that's not necessarily exactly tied to a 30-day notice. Some of it is, but a 30-day notice, no cause notice, goes both ways. The tenant can provide it to you and the landlord can provide it to the tenant. And you cannot use it as a backdoor to an eviction if the eviction process failed or anything like that. This is strictly just for no reason. You want to get a new tenant in, but it's at the end of their lease, so on and so forth. I think I am talking in circles now. Um, some special considerations with a 30-day no cause notice is for anyone senior 60 and up. They require a 60 day notice. So that the NRS for that, I'm going to look down. The NRS is 40.251, paragraph 2. It states that if a tenant is 60 years or older or has physical or mental disability, then they can request an extension of the 30-day no cause notice to 60 days. Oh, another thing too, they must be in writing. If you call your tenant and say, hey, this is your 30-day notice, that's not sufficient, it has to be in writing, and then vice versa. If the tenant is, sometimes tenants buy their own homes and then they're moving out, so they have to provide it to you in writing as well. So anyways, when someone is 60 years and older, you can provide them a 30-day notice. It doesn't mean that you can't do it and it has to be 60. It just means that the tenant can request in writing an additional 30 days and you're required to give them that time. And this also works for anyone that has any type of disability as well. So just some considerations to think about. I would say too on that before I jump to the next one, just good practice is to include in the language, if you do have seniors or somebody with a disability and you are providing a 30-day notice, that you can let them know on the cover letter of it or on the notice itself that they have the right to request to extend that period, because some people don't know that. But just keep that in mind as a landlord if you have somebody that you're renting to that falls under those consideration categories. That you may need 60 days instead of 30. And even if they don't fall under that, just always be prepared that someone's going to need extra time. 30 days is kind of a short window when someone gets a notice, and then all of a sudden they got to start packing and moving, and they got work and family and kids and all this other stuff, and they got to start putting in applications and all that kind of stuff. So if you really do need your property back, I would just do a 60-day notice anyways. It's not going to really count in court because they don't have forms for 60-day notices, but you could give your tenants a heads up at least, and then give them a formal 30-day notice. So you kind of give yourself that buffer to ensure they're out in time. Okay, so the last one of notices is the 24-hour notice of entry. A lot of landlords that manage properties themselves, they keep extra keys of the property, and when they're managing it themselves, a lot of times they do their own repairs, or they just want to inspect it, or maybe they're doing a refi and need an appraisal, or maybe something's going on with the insurance on the renewal and they have to take photos, and they just kind of come into the property, or just say, hey, I'm going to be there in an hour and I got to do this, it'll be really quick. Your tenants are paying rent to have a house and their privacy and their space. Like, I understand you're the owner, but it's their home right now. Like, you need to coordinate it with them. And if it really is an emergency, then utilize the 24-hour notice of entry. Like, I think the only times that we've ever had to do that is we get a call from a neighbor that says that there's water coming out of the garage, so it's probably a water heater that burst, and the tenant's not home. And so we call the tenant, we try and get in touch with them, and then we have no choice but to shut off the water at the street, and then we do a 24-hour notice of entry, and then we come in and we fix it. So emergencies, well, realistically, an emergency, you could just come in without the 24-hour notice. But either way, we still try and honor a 24-hour notice of entry. They must be documented, even if it's done by the mail or a posted notice on the door. Oh, my dog's going crazy. You have to state on the 24-hour notice not only the date and time window that you'll be there, but the reason for entry. You can't just be like, hey, I'm coming in, no reason. You have to have a reason. Sorry, I was trying to read through ahead to see if it was even worth mentioning, but it says that it has to be reasonable, avoid Sunday mornings or after hours unless tenant agrees. Let's see, this one seems simple, but it's one of the most commonly violated rules. I actually did not know that, but it makes sense, right? Like I said, a lot of landlords that manage properties themselves tend to not use a 24-hour legal notice of entry. They just go. it's kind of a violation for the tenant. But um, yeah, I hear it a lot with self-managed properties. I mean, property managers, they're not going to do that. We're going to follow all the legal requirements that we have to do. So for me personally, I haven't really needed to use this. Most tenants work with us pretty well. We do work for the owner, but we do try and protect the tenants too. And so we try and make a really cohesive relationship between us, the owner, and the tenant. So a lot of this stuff, I'll be honest, we haven't really had to use. Um, I guess the only other roll time that I've had to use a 24-hour notice. There's this one property. It's a newer build. I think it was built in 23, and every single year they have fire. What are those called? Oh my gosh, the little fire sprinklers. The fire department comes every single year to inspect those, and they have to physically go into every single property. And we're made aware like weeks in advance. So we tell the tenants weeks in advance, but we still do a 24-hour notice of entry, because even if the tenant's not home, the fire department will come in and check those sprinklers. And they do it every single year. Every single year. Okay, so I got through all the notices. I'm just double checking if I missed anything. So the 5 notices are the foundation of legal property management in Nevada. If you're not using them correctly or at all, you're exposing yourself, your broker, and your owner at risk, or to risk. So to recap, we have a 7-day pay or quit for unpaid rent. We have a 3-day nuisance for unsafe and disruptive behavior. We have a 5-day lease violation for non-monetary violations. You have a 30-day no-cause notice for ending a month-to-month tenancy, and then a 24-hour notice for legal access with proper notice to the property. Trying to think if I'm going to go over evictions. We're already at almost 30 minutes. I'll do it real quick. I'll just do a quick summary, and I'm sure later on I'll have some more about evictions. So the 7-day pay or quit. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit more. A 7-day pay or quit, someone hasn't paid rent, so you file this. Now, in that 7 days, the tenant hasn't paid you, and they have not vacated the property, right, in this theoretical idea. What then occurs is one of two things. If the tenant does not respond to the courts to the 7-day pay or quit, and a response example could be like, hey, I'm getting paid next week. I just need a couple extra days. Doesn't matter what they write. Just something, and then they respond. What happens is that you get a court calendar day. So it could be a couple days from now. Depends. After COVID, we were backlogged a few months. Now it goes pretty quick. So now what would then happen is you have to be at court, whether you're in Henderson, North Las Vegas, whatever court you're at. They'll tell you daytime. So let's just say on a Tuesday at 3, you show up and you do eviction court. At eviction court, everyone's sworn in at the same time, and you sit and you just listen to every case until your case is called. And then you and the tenant, to separate tables, go up in front of the judge, and you both get opportunities to explain what's going on. From there, depending on the situation and the circumstances, the judge will then decide what happens next. If the eviction is granted in your favor, and that's what you're going for, then the judge will assign a constable to be out to the property within 48 hours. Sometimes, if this happens on a Friday, if you're in Las Vegas and Henderson, it wouldn't happen on a Friday, it'd be a Thursday. But if let's use Henderson. If it happened on a Thursday, then the constable's not coming out till Monday. So they have the entire weekend to get out of the property. Then on Monday, the constable will come to the property. Just so you know, you still have to hire a locksmith to come out there, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do. They're not going to do that for you. So the constable will come out. You should also be there with a locksmith. The constable will sweep the property and get everybody out of the home and saying, you got to leave. Then the locksmith will then unplug your garage and then rekey every door, whether it's a garage door, the back door, the front door, rekey the entire property so that person cannot come back in. From there, you are required to hold on to their belongings for 30 days. You have to show proof of communication to schedule time for them to come back for their belongings within that 30 days. whether that's text messages, whether that's emails, whether that's physical notices, if you even know where they're at. You probably don't know their new address, but either way, you have to make it available for them within that 30 days after being booted out from the constable to be able to come back and get their belongings. Some people, and I don't prefer this, but you can do whatever you want. Some people gather up all their belongings and either move it to the garage or get a storage unit, move it to the storage unit. I don't like to do that for a few reasons. Those being is you're paying somebody to move all their stuff, number one. So now you have an added cost. If you're doing a storage unit, you now have an added cost to that that you're not realistically ever going to get paid back for. But the most important thing is any damages to their belongings or any stolen goods from their stuff. Like, it's just better to not touch it. And I know it sucks to not have access to your property to get things done, to get it back on the market and relist it. Now, you've gone through this whole process of the 7-day pay or quit notice, which was really more like 11 days. And then now you had to wait for the court and the calendar, and then you had to wait for the constable. So you're already pretty much probably at 30 days as it is, if not more, 30 to 45 days. Now you're saying like a whole nother 30 days of leaving their belongings in the property. Like, yeah, but I still think it's a cheaper route with less liability. It sucks, yes, but that's just a personal preference. You can choose whatever you want to choose, but just know that if you do utilize the garage, for example, if there is a garage, or move everything to one spot, you could potentially have them come after you for stuff being stolen, whether it was or wasn't, stuff being broken, whether it was or wasn't your fault. And then, of course, the additional cost of either paying someone to do it or paying for a storage unit. So my other recommendation is after the constable has swept them out of the property and the locksmith has done their thing, you just take a zillion photos, videos, everything, and then just don't touch anything until they can come and get the remaining stuff. The vast majority of people, when that happens and they do get evicted, they've already moved out all the stuff that they want and they don't ever communicate with you again and they just ghost you the vast majority of the time. Or they literally were able to get 100% of everything out, but they're still going to ghost you and not talk to you. So you still have to hold on to it for 30 days, even if they don't communicate with you, unless they specifically put in writing, we don't want any of this stuff and you can toss it or whatever. You got to hold on to it. So just something to think about. I would say the entire process, aside from holding their belongings for 30 days, an eviction process from beginning to end is, let's just say, about 45 days-ish in that time frame. Max 90 days if you're including the 30 days in there. They move pretty quickly out here, in my opinion. And a lot of the times we can help mitigate what's going on to avoid the whole situation altogether and just make it easy break for everybody. So, okay, I think I'm done rambling about notices. If you have questions, email me, let me know, reach out. And then again, please, if you found this episode useful, helpful, give a quick review, subscribe, share with anybody who may want to know more about property management in Las Vegas. Oh, you know, it's funny, as I'm saying all this stuff about evictions, I have coming up next, we'll break down the eviction process in Clark County step by step and what really happens after you serve one of these notices. So I guess I'm going to go further into it next week. Having 2 weeks off from being sick has just scrambled my brain. So I apologize. I apologize for kind of being a mess. But either way, please follow Real Talk Vegas Property Management. Until then, I'm going to have to do that. So until then, keep it real and keep it rented.